Hey guys, welcome back to Clockwork, Noodles for another breakdown of Vinland Saga Season 2, Episode 14. This episode was awesome. This episode had a lot of circular themes coming back round on it, stuff that we've been told, and now it's all coming back round in a different story. Make sure you guys are subscribed. We are going into a new season, so there's more stuff going on the channel. I may be considering doing a bit of a swap when it comes to one of the breakdowns on the channel. Depend how I feel really and what I plan to put in the gap. We'll have to see how that goes, because I could end up swapping with something that you are watching. A really good week of Vinland Saga. I am enjoying the story. I do think we are really getting into the thick of it. The start of the second season was slow, but it's always been really good in its own sense. And I think now we're really getting into the crux. We're finally getting some decisions that really have to be made. Let's discuss Arnheid, because she's a character that up until this point we've not really known a lot about. Often enough when it comes to history, we don't really get to know a great deal about women unless they are rich or they are married to someone important. Nice to get a story from Arnheid, from somebody who otherwise would remain a voice which is lost to history. I immediately knew that the child was dead. He reaches his hand out. Kind of gave me the sense that she was terrified. She was scared of him. Obviously, this isn't the man that you've grown up with. He's been through some stuff. She's looking at the man that she wants to run to, but she also doesn't want to run to it because there's also the chance that if she did run away with him, they would probably both end up dead. You want nothing more than her and him to escape, but at the same time, if she was to jump onto that horse, very quickly you see Snake take care of that horse. I hate that. Saddest thing when it comes to a lot of these war stories is I always hate the animal death, because the animals don't really get to choose whether they be there or not. I was really worried that Vinland Saga was gonna show their child's death. Thankfully, they didn't. I was teetering. I was like, oh, this story's starting to get to me, and I was like, don't show it. Please don't show it. We get the point. We know what's gonna happen. Very brutal. It's a very brutal story. I think this is the reason why a lot of people put Vinland Saga up with Berserk. Einar being Team Arnheid, even though he knows that he can't have her. I am so happy for him, because I was really worried that he'd have his heart broken and he wouldn't act, but seeing him still realise that this is the right thing. Right now, Arnheid could be happy, could be free, and if she wants to go to her husband, he's not here to kidnap her. He's here to reclaim his wife, the person that he once upon a time had a happy relationship with. I want them to win. I want them to run away together. I want them to be happy, but I know that if they do, they're just going to end up dead, or they're going to end up hunted, and it's going to be bad. How to feel at times with this show, because this show makes me feel things, and I'm like, oh, what should I be thinking right now? Because I want these two free. I don't understand how they could be. Don't want them both to die. The OP also seems to suggest that they're maybe going to get away. The OP is very symbolic, so I could just be reading into the OP a bit. Thorfinn taking the voice of reason, the more pacifist role. He tells Einar not to do anything. I like Snake as a character, but I also don't like Snake as a character. There's a lot of characters in this show who I want to like, but you also can't like them because of the situation. It's very interesting to see that Gadir is very good with his sword. Now, I wasn't quite sure if he was just wildly swinging and this actually was just me seeing him moving fast, and whether that meant he was good or whether he was just desperate, because he could just be desperate and angry because he wants his wife back. It's Snake taking that one shot, realising that the guy's wounded, and having to take that one opening to hit him in the weak point. I don't think Snake would have had an easy win if he hadn't noticed the guy was wounded. I don't think he would have had him down on the ground, because we're told that this is a guy who has already killed people. Whether it is by desperation and him wildly swinging, it's effective swinging. He's managed to kill people already. Snake ends up taking a low blow just to knock him out. I want this guy to go away with his wife. There seems to be a lot of circular storytelling going on. Einar holding back as well at the end when you know he wants to say some choice words to Snake. That must have taken a lot within him to just say nothing and know that, you know, if I say something, A, the guy's not going to listen, but B, it's to no effect. I could say what I want to say, but this guy probably already knows what it is that I want to say to him. Irony of the storm starting to blow in as we end up talking about metaphorical storms in your life. Sometimes there's situations where you know that you can't win. It's interesting to see that Einar is the one wanting to take action. Let's go, let's try and sneak in, let's do this. Whilst Arnheid is the one who decides that actually maybe sometimes it's best to weather the storm. You accept you can't do anything, you just wait for it to roll on by. We were leading into the story we learned earlier by Old Man Catil, who I completely forgot he was there. When he was in the bed behind her, I was like, oh yeah, you're here, aren't you? Happy though, because he's not dead yet, and I do think he is an interesting character, and I'm happy that we get to learn a bit about him this week, because it does feel like this might be the last chance to learn anything about him as a character, because he's definitely telling us stories now, because he may not have another chance. We do get a nice chance to learn about Arnheid though. I did think initially that the OP was Einar maybe having a kid, but it makes more sense that it is indeed Gadir. He just looks identical to Einar, and I do wonder if they've done this on purpose, not just because because we wanted to show her being nice to Einar. She could have still been nice to Einar if he didn't look like the husband. Might show a bit of a lesson, like this could happen to Einar. Maybe he's got the ability to turn into this guy. I do understand why Gadir is angry. Interesting to see that maybe they've chosen this look on particular to maybe have a bit more of a link that Einar could be this person. Thorfinn on the edge trying to give him that voice of reason now. He is indeed the one in the OP. I was really confused that it was Einar having a kid. That makes no sense. If I now think about it, it makes absolutely no sense. Gadir once upon a time was political. He opened up this decision to all of the people in the camp. He didn't just say, look, we're going to go and fight these guys. It was interesting to see them actually discussing something, because up until this point, there doesn't often seem to be a lot of discussion when it comes to this period of time. People just seem to act, and a lot of people seem to die. And of course, this still ends the same way, but I think it might have been one of the first town discussions that we've actually seen on the anime. Initially feel quite similar to the story we were told with Old Man Catil. This is what I mean by circular storytelling. Old Man Catil tells us the story about having a big farm that he cannot protect. Start growing things bigger and bigger and bigger. You start panicking more and more if you can protect it or not, or if you haven't got the means to protect it. Old Man Catil was all about living within your means. In this sense, the same thing applies, because the men start to realise that we don't actually need this, but we know that the power balance is going to be disrupted. Now, we don't quite know if that is the case, because it does still end bad anyway. We don't know if they came back victorious. Maybe they came back and they did have that iron. It looks to me like they've made a very bad call. We could have it if we want. We can be rich if we want. Maybe making a decision motivated slightly by greed, but it did feel like it was leaning into the same vein that the warning that Old Man Catil gave us in the first place. It was also a very interesting look at women in the period. Up until this point, I have stated that women taken by a man, and that's really all you get. And obviously we are learning about slaves in this story, women having no rights regardless. And I'm actually quite glad that they are touching upon it, because it's very easy to watch a show and nobody really addresses it. They don't really talk about how a woman may feel, because again, we don't really have a lot of information regarding women, their viewpoints when it comes to history. So it's very interesting that the author has chosen to pinpoint Arnheid. She knows that she hasn't got a right. She knows she doesn't have a decision, and it's nice to see her point of view. So I found it quite refreshing, even though it's quite a sad story. It's refreshing to get it from a different perspective and have male characters listening to her. But you can see that she doesn't fully understand the reason why they're going. We had enough iron. It's not like we're struggling or anything. To me, also, it felt like maybe they a rushed call. Maybe they really should have just left some people behind. Everything kind of goes wrong because there's nobody guarding the women, and the women can't protect themselves. Old Man Catil's story is pretty similar to the idea that if you can't protect something, then you really shouldn't be expanding beyond your means. We do get that really painful sequence. I think maybe the sequence that almost triggered me to cry was the Arnheid's son sequence, because you know what's going to happen. You've been told that he's dead. You know how brutal it is. This moment as well when you see Thorfinn covering his face. So Thorfinn is also affected by this part of the story, because Thorfinn probably knows that in other people's stories, he is the monster that took away that son and probably killed them. I think the reason why we see him covering his face at this point is because he knows this. He knows that he is this monster in many people's stories. So Arnheid is telling the story from the side of the victim. Thorfinn used to be on the side of the victor. We saw in season 1 a few towns and homes being destroyed by him and Askeladd. We're now, in a sense, hearing the stories that it could have pretty much come from the town that he had invaded. This may as well be a story that he is responsible for. So I did like the little moment. It was so subtle, because at the moment Thorfinn is taking a bit more of a back seat, but it was just that one moment of him just reacting. I thought he was going to cry. A little tiny animation I didn't even have to put in, but they did put in just to show you that Thorfinn is hurt by this. He's reacting. Now, the next bit I really, really love is when Arnheid gets that spark in her eye and the fire comes crackling back to life. Oh, I love that. That was so clever. And again, I didn't realise Old Man Catil was listening, because up until this point, Snake wrote him off as being senile. And I was like, okay, fine, he's got dementia, he remembers nothing. But in the early stages of dementia, they have good days, they have bad days, from a friend who recently went through this, that sometimes they remember, sometimes they don't. And obviously, at this point, he's having a lucid moment where he can remember everything, and he's listened to a story. I like to think of it as he's getting those regrets on his deathbed because he's close to death, maybe remembering the things that he regrets, because he says, like, I made a cowardly decision. I know the Norsemen would, like, scoff at what I've done. I love the fact that the fire comes back to life. You know she wants to do something. You know she knows that she has to do something, and she's going to be left with regret if I do nothing. Even despite the fact that, yes, I am carrying Catil's child, this is still your husband. This is still somebody you had a life with before you were forced to be a slave. I really like the way that they wrote this episode in particular. I think the writing is very, very strong. And then it goes into a story by Old Man Catil, which I like because we don't know enough about him as a character. So there's lots of characters who, up until this point, haven't had enough attention. So getting a bit of attention with this guy is really, really nice. It was very similar to Catil initially, where he makes a bit of a pacifist call where he doesn't want to stick his neck out and he's scared. This decision that he regrets, because at the end of the day, nobody wins. The girl ends up dead. The husband ends up dead. Catil probably hates his father for letting it. Probably guessed that he blamed him a little bit for the way that it ended because, you know, you let her go. I loved her. This ended up bad. Now this is probably your fault, Dad, kind of thing. You can imagine how that conversation has gone. I can see this as Old Man Catil having regrets on his deathbed because he realizes that sometimes waiting the storm out, doing nothing and just accepting your fate is fine, but you will be left with regrets. You'll be left with scars. You'll wish you have done something. I really like the way that it spurs her on to make a plunge. Arnheid decides, you know, I'm gonna go. I don't think it's gonna end well, but the OP gives me hope that they're gonna end up as runaways. Maybe they're gonna end up on the run, which is still not much of a life. Maybe it's something better than living a forced slavery life where you're just gonna have to accept things. Maybe sometimes it is best to control your own destiny and go out as you want. And I don't remember what anime I got that from, but I think it's been a motivator for many a character. Whatever anime I am quoting right now, thank you. I think it feels quite appropriate. Fun time watching this episode. I got a lot of information. I thought it was really well done. I liked the music at certain parts as well. Something happened around episode 12 and now I'm like, ooh, you've got my attention fully. The first half had my attention, but it was slow. So I was like, okay, cool. But now I'm like, oh, okay, I am sitting up and I am listening to you because I want to know more. I'm now worried about what Arneid's going to do. I'm worried about Snake is going to kill them both, maybe in an attempt to try and get them to stay. But again, I don't think he'd try and hurt Arnheid. That's his master's favourite, as they put it, which I hate. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. My ideas are all over the place today. I'm having a bit of a scatterbrain day where I've got notes, but I'm not actually reading my notes. I seem to be going a bit more off the topic lately. Thank you guys so much for tuning in once again. I am ever thankful for your support. Always grateful for you people who have to sit through longer seasons with me because it's 24 episodes. I'm always amazed when people tell me at the end that they've sat through all of my breakdowns and they were interesting. It's always surprising to me that people find my thoughts or my murmurings interesting. Thank you so much. I will see you guys again next week. Take care of yourselves. Bye bye.